All right, we have two topics for today. So we're going to determine if an inverse is a function. So it's like a yes or no question. You're going to do the horizontal line test. So if this is my graph and I draw a horizontal line, I want to see how many times does it touch. It can only touch once. So in this problem, this horizontal line touched this graph twice, so it's not a function. The inverse is not a function. And here, since it only touched once, then yeah, the inverse is a function. The other thing we're doing is actually finding the inverse. And basically, you're just going to take your x's and y's and switch them. And remember that f of x means y, so you may not see the letter y in there initially, but you remember you can replace that. When you get your new y, you just have to get y all by itself. So you have to isolate the variable. You're going to solve the equation for the new y. You may have to undo adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. You may even have to undo a square or a cube. So a square root, a cube root, etc. All right, and we'll get to some that have examples of those. All right, so it says use the horizontal line test to determine whether the inverse of each relation is a function. Horizontal lines go left to right. So if I drew a horizontal line, it can touch only once. That fails, right? Even if I drew this horizontal line here and it touches only once, that's okay, but if anywhere it touches more than once, then it fails, right? So that is a no. All right, horizontal line here only touches once. Even if I drew a horizontal line up here, only touches once, so that's okay. You could remember this from last semester. We did the vertical line test. That tests the original graph. Horizontal line test tests the inverse. Okay, so this says find the inverse of each function. So we want to switch x and y, right? Now I don't see a y, but this means y. So this is exactly the same thing as if I were to see y equals 5x. So first thing you're going to do is you're switching. You're taking the variables x and y, and you're switching them. But everything else stays the same. So the equals sign and the 5 are going to stay where they're at. You're just going to put x equals 5y. But now I need to get my new y by itself. So how would I keep this by itself? I need to divide by 5. Right, so I have x over 5, that equals y. Now, you're going to sometimes see this written with some function notation. And the inverse of something uses this -1 symbol. So the inverse of f of x is with f with a -1 of x. You just call it the inverse of f of x. And that equals x over 5. Okay, so maybe as our last step here, we'll add on a third step. Replace y equals with the inverse symbol. Okay. All right, number 4. So this means y, so this is y equals x minus 2. Right? We're going to take our x's and y's, and we're switching them. So this says x equals y minus 2. So is y by itself? Nope. How do I undo the subtract 2? I add 2 to both sides. So this is x plus 2 equals y. And then this is x plus 2 equals the inverse of f of x. Okay, flip over to the other side, and we got a few more problems, and we're all done. Okay, find the inverse. So this means y equals 8x minus 3. Take your x's and y's, and literally you're just switching places. X equals 8y minus 3. So ask yourself, is y by itself? No, it's got an 8 and a 3. So we're going to undo our 3 first. We have x plus 3 equals 8y. Is y all by itself? No. How do I get rid of the 8? I divide. So you can just leave this. X plus 3 over 8 equals y. And so that's the inverse of f of x equals x plus 3 over 8. You could say this equals inverse of f of x. I just usually write that on the left side. Okay, so this means y equals. We're going to switch our x and y. We have x equals negative 3y plus 6. So we need to undo by subtracting. X minus 6 equals negative 3y. How do I get rid of a multiply by negative 3, divide by negative 3? Okay, so we got x minus 6 over negative 3 equals y. And if I want to write inverse of f of x equals x minus 6 over negative 3, then that works as well. All right, this one we got that equals y, so 2x plus 1 over 3. Take my x and y and switch them. We have x equals 2y plus 1 over 3. So this time we have a 1, a 2, and a 3 to get rid of. So we're going to get rid of division first. All right, I'll use a different color. You're going to multiply by 3 on both sides. That gets rid of our division. So you're left with 2y plus 1. This is 3x. I need to get rid of my addition. So we have 3x minus 1 equals 2y. And then if I want to undo my multiplication, I divide by 2. So 3x minus 1 equals 2. Now I'll just leave it on the right side this time. So inverse of f of x equals 3x minus 1 over 2. All right, last problem. This means y equals, right? Okay, so to find any inverse, I just follow my steps. Switch x and y. Oops. I won't use the highlighter, right? X equals, sorry. All right, x equals y plus 7 squared. So I switched my x and y. I'm going to solve my new equation for y. So if I want to undo anything, if I want to undo a square, what's the opposite of squaring something? Well, you square root something. However, if you square root something, you have to say it's plus or minus whatever that is. Okay, so the square and the square root cancel, so you're left with just y plus 7. Is y all by itself? No. So we're going to subtract 7. So we have plus or minus square root of x minus 7 equals y. So we have plus or minus square root of x minus 7, and we're just going to replace this with the symbol for inverse of f of x. Okay? If you have any questions, write them down or circle the problem and then ask about those in class tomorrow.